Welcome to a tutorial that will cover everything you need to learn on Ansible Playbooks. We will see how you can manage remote servers with a few blocks of YAML syntax, and learning how to write playbooks is a must skill to add to your DevOps resume. So I prepared a tutorial summarizing the most important topics on Ansible for you. This tutorial is a continuation of the Ansible Basics tutorial that I released recently, so I also recommend watching that one in addition to this Ansible Playbooks crash course. Let's dive in. Now, throughout this tutorial, we are going to work with Visual Code, and it's really important to me that all the distribution users, including Windows, Mac, or any Linux distribution, could follow along. So that's why I highly recommend installing the Ansible extension as you see here in Visual Code, because it will enable syntax highlighting and auto completions, which are very important in my opinion when you write large YAML files, especially when you are not familiar with all the fields that we are going to write in these YAML files. So first things first, please skip to the given timeline if you already have this extension set up. For Windows user, it's a bit more complex, so either if you're a Mac or a Linux user, feel free to skip to the given timeline below. Okay, so for Windows users, setting up the extension might be a little bit complicated. So what we need to do as a Windows users, we need to enable WSL and ensure that a WSL with a Linux kind like Ubuntu is running successfully. And so doing that is a really easy process if you just type in how to set up WSL on Google and proceed with the steps of it. But right after you have the WSL running and working, then we are going to connect to that WSL from our Visual Code. And the way that you can do that is by going here to a remote explorer and basically finding in your WSL target. This should already be here if you have WSL running successfully. And once you have a WSL running successfully, then you should see it right here. And you should be able to connect to it. And once you do that, then you are going to see here underneath that you are connected to the WSL, that the files that you're writing are running inside the WSL. That is what Remote Explorer is in Visual Code. And once you have that, then you have to go ahead and install the Ansible extension, because it has to be enabled on that WSL in particular. So that's why we have to install it. And once you have that, then everything is really going to function for you. So if we go here to the first playbook.yaml file, and we'd like to test that our auto completions are working, we could simply go here and try to add another task. And we do that by just saying that we'd like to have a new task, and I'm immediately passing a name. So I can say second task, and then I could just go ahead and start typing in a module name. Ansible.built-in, let's say. You can see how many modules are available to me to just access to one of them. And not only the auto-completion works for the modules that are available, but also for the mandatory fields for the modules. For example, we are trying in this example to run on our local host, and we define under our tasks only one task that is named create file, and we use the file module. And you can see that if I delete this and I start typing in path, then you can see that it says required. So that is perfect. It also knows to autocomplete the fields that are required passing here. So let me do a couple of undos here to bring back these two lines. And now we can go ahead and try to run our first playbook. Now, if you watch the Ansible Getting Started video, then you should already be familiar with the process of running playbooks and how to use the host file that we showed earlier on, and also how the YAML file is written in a very simple playbook. So if not, then I really also recommend watching the Getting Started video just to be familiar with Ansible basics before proceeding with the playbooks. So now if we go here and say Ansible playbook and we refer to the YAML file, then you can see that at first it gathers the facts because that happens in the background every time. And then it runs the task of creating a file. And it does it in the local host. And if you remember, the path was temp hello world.txt. So if we go to the temporary directory and we list the files, then you can see that I have the hello world.txt file right there. Perfect. So now that we have the VS Code set up, then it's about time to write a meaningful playbook that you can go ahead and run against your Linux servers. Now we are going to write a list of meaningful tasks in our playbook so that we could learn along the way all the nice features that you have in Ansible playbooks. Alright, so let's go ahead and start writing the host file at first. You can see that we have a group of servers that is named localhost that has one server underneath named localhost 01. It includes the magic variable Ansible connection equals to local so that it points to my local host. Now I'm going to change these two servers just to not really confuse ourselves with the actual name of the server under the group here, and that is just more making sense. Okay, so we are going to specify here one more variable, and that is going to be the username that Ansible should try to connect with. And it's important that you have the ability to control the user in different servers in your playbooks. So in my case, I'm just going to pass here Ansible_user equals to my user, JSC. Notice how I only used one blank space to differentiate between the variables. It is not a comma or something like that. Okay, so now here in our playbook file, we are going to write a basic task. So let's go ahead and start with dash hosts to specify the group of hosts that we like to run against, and it's going to be servers like that. And right underneath, we are going to go inside the indentation and we will say tasks. And under tasks, we will start defining our different tasks. So each task should receive a name like you probably saw in the Ansible getting started video. And I'm just going to call this install packages like the following. And right after we have done this, then I'm just going to go ahead and specify the module that I'm going to use in my task. And in that case, it's going to be apt. Now for the built-in modules in Ansible, you could also write ansible.built-in like that. But that is just too long and not really necessary, so I prefer to use a short way in that case. And apt is the package manager for Ubuntu, so that's why it's available to use for me. Okay, so right here, I'm going to go ahead and inside the apt, I'm going to mention the names of the packages that I'm interested to install. And notice how, again, the autocompletion says name, but it is a list of strings that I can go ahead and specify because the apt module knows to deal with installing multiple packages at once. So if I press on enter, then you can see that it already started giving me the hyphen syntax for writing different elements in the list, so-called. So let's say that we like to install the nginx package, so that is going to be it. And right after we're done with specifying the names, then we can get out from the indentation here and we could just try to pass in more attributes that are just supported for the apt module. And if we type in here state, then we would have multiple options that we could pass here. So by sending the hotkey of Control space, you can actually have a look to all the available options. So if we press on Control space, then you can see all the available options. You can see that the present is the default, which will basically install the given packages, but you can also specify to delete the given list of packages. So we could pass in here state equals to present, or we could just not pass it because it's the default, and let's leave it as it is. Perfect, so now if we bring in our terminal and we try to run this with Ansible playbook, first -playbook YAML like the following, then we are going to encounter some problems. And the reason for that, it is because we never passed the host file that Ansible should watch. And that is why it says could not match supplied host pattern servers. So it's going to ignore and do basically nothing. But if we go ahead and mention the file name like the following. So our host file is named hosts, and then we say first playbook.yaml, then the results are going to be different. So if we take a look to the problems now, then you can see that it is basically complaining on how we try to install a package without being a root. And when we install packages on Linux servers, then you have to become a privileged user. Otherwise, you just can't install packages on the entire system. And the way that we are going to overcome this is by mentioning our sudo password so that the user JSC could become a sudo user, and this is necessary for specific tasks in Ansible like installing packages. So if we go to our first playbook.yaml file and we go right here in the indentation inside the task and we say become equals to true, then it should be enough to run this task as a privileged user. Alright, so now if we bring in our terminal and we run the previous command that basically is responsible to run the playbook, then we are going to encounter good results, and you can see that it is in changed state here. Now I do want to mention a point that is quite important. If the following command is failing with an error that says a sudo password is required, then for your playbooks you might have to pass in --ask become pass. And basically this flag enables to stop the playbook before execution right here, right in the beginning, and ask for the sudo password, because by default a lot of systems are requiring it to provide the user's password in order to verify that you could become a sudo user. And so now if I go ahead and provide my sudo password, and you can see the results if I write the password here in the become password. Obviously it is not visible, but like in any Linux password, you are not going to see the characters that you type in. And you can see that for the next execution, it is running successfully as well. So you might need to provide the sudo password for actions like installing packages. And so just be aware of that if you encounter a password is required for becoming a sudo. Now, in addition to the ask become pass, there is one more important thing that you should be aware of that defines Ansible in a very important way. You can see that for the task install packages where we installed Nginx, previously we saw the changed status, but the next execution we only saw OK. Well, that defines that no action from Ansible was required. And the reason for that, it is because Ansible already installed the Nginx package, and so that is the beauty behind the majority of the modules in Ansible. If nothing has to be changed, Ansible is not really going to take any changes. So this means that when you run a task, it changes the target system to the desired state. If you run the same task again, it won't make any further changes because the system is already in the desired state. Okay, so now that we know that Nginx has been installed correctly on our system, reminder that the playbook is running against our local system. So we should go to the web browser and type in localhost and see the following result. Because Nginx by default uses port 80, so we don't really have to go there and mention some port divided by a colon. And so if you see that result, then it really means that the playbook ran successfully and that the Nginx service is running. So going back to our playbook file, it could have been nice to start displaying some better pages in our Nginx server. And so for that, we can go ahead and inject specific files to the location where Nginx service watches to display different HTML display. So in order to do that, then we will go ahead and define a new task. And we could name it something like template HTML file. And the reason that I'm using template, it is because we are going to see how you can go ahead and create generic files with placeholders thanks to the Jinja syntax. So we are going to say here that we'd like to use the template module, and this is going to take in several mandatory arguments as well. Obviously a source and a destination. source being the file that you'd like to grab from the directory of the playbook, destination being the path where you'd like to see the file in the destination servers. And obviously it could be multiple servers depending on how many hosts are mentioned in our hosts file. So let's go ahead and start designing that. We are going to go ahead and create a new file here, new folder, and we will name this templates. And then we will go and create here a new file inside that we will call it index.html like the following. Now in here I can just go ahead and type in a very basic HTML like this, and we will see how we can move this to a location where Nginx service is installed and watching for HTML files. So first things first, our source is going to be a relative path from this playbook. So it's going to be templates and then index.html, and our destination is going to be inside a folder where I already know that this is the folder that Nginx watches for HTML files. So it's going to be /var 3 times W and then HTML, and then we will just call the file right there index.html like the following. And down below I'm also going to mention the permission mode that I like to have in that file. So it's going to be mode equals to 644 like this. And that line here is going to be responsible to make it readable and writable for the user owner of this file, and then read for all the other users. Alright, so if we bring in our terminal and we run the playbook, then you can see that for install packages it did not do anything special, but you can see that in the destination we cannot write a new file. And you can see that it says that this destination is not writable. Now you might already have a few guesses why that happens, but basically if we go back to our playbook and we take a look to the become equals to true here, basically the become equals to true is only going to be applied for one of the tasks here. And the reason for that, it is because this key value is right under the task of install packages. But we could also move the become equals to true for the playbook overall. And that would mean to take this key value and to remove this empty line and to move it right here, right in the host section, meaning in the playbook configuration section so-called. So that for each task, Ansible would try to run it with sudo privileges. And now if we bring back our terminal and we retry running the playbook, let's delete everything and run it one more time, then you can see that now we are in changed state, and you can see that it completed it successfully. And it could also be a great idea now refreshing our Nginx. If you remember, this was the first page that we saw earlier on, and if we refresh this, then you can see that now we see this is our page from Ansible. So this definitely means that we have done a great job. Now originally template is not for taking one file and move it to another, although it might be used in that way like you saw in this example. But the real power of this module is the ability to template files that include placeholders. Now Ansible knows to integrate with a unique file kind that is named Jinja2. And in these files you could provide placeholders so that Ansible will take care to replace these values when executing the task. So let's show an example of that. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to rename this file to be index.html, but I'm going to add here .j2. So we basically change the extension of this file. And right after that, then I'm going to go back to my file here. And besides saying this is our page from Ansible, it could have been nice if we would have an indication about the host name where this Nginx runs from, for example. And so here we could refer to one of the known variables in Ansible. Now, if you watch the first episode in the Ansible tutorials on my channel, then you know that by default, Ansible playbooks are pulling all the facts on the hosts that we are running against. So we have a lot of metadata that is available, and one of the key values that are available is Ansible underscore hostname. And the way that we call the variables is with the double curly bracket syntax. So now we could go to our playbook file and we could change this to J2 because the source file name has been changed now. And now if we go back to our terminal and we try to run it once again, then again you can see the changed status in this specific task. So I'm going to go ahead and refresh this page here, and you can see how it is being templated. It really uses my PC name besides printing in the double curly brackets. Obviously, that is how the template module is unique. You can go ahead and put a lot of placeholders and your outcome could be something totally different depending on the variables that you decide to call them. Alright, so now that we understood how to template files, then it is also recommended to run this with an additional flag that you can go ahead and add in your playbooks. Now, if we go ahead here and right after our playbook, we say --diff, then it is going to be responsible to show the difference in some cases for the modules that are supporting it. For the template module, it will always show you the difference of what was existed and what is going to be replaced with. And this means that if we go now to our Jinja2 file, and let's do a very minimalistic change. Let's change the tags to be h2, and then we will go back to our terminal, and then we will run the playbook again. And excuse me, I did not save our visual code, so let's do that one more time. And obviously nothing changed, so that is why we only saw okay. Now if we run it again, then you can see how nice we can take a look to the difference. So if we zoom in to here, then you can see that it was that line and it is going to be changed to that line. And so obviously this is useful for templating large files, and especially if you like to change configurations of different services. Speaking about changing configuration of different services, then there is a module in Ansible that allows you to manage these as well. So if we go back to VS Code and we go right here and we add another task that says something like this. So we will create a name and we will name it, let's say that we'd like to restart our Nginx service for whatever reason. And then we will just use the service module, and it is going to take two mandatory arguments. It is going to take the service name, which has to be Nginx in our case. And the interesting part is, of course, you can control all the states of your services. So we can say state equals to, and I will use control space. And you can see that we have access to all these states. We could decide to start, stop, or restart, or reload, which is also an action that is mostly used for services that are supporting loading the configurations without really restarting the process itself. So if we go ahead and we use stopped, let's actually stop the service so we can really see how Nginx won't work if we do something like this. And then we could go to our terminal and see what will happen if we run this. So if we run our playbook, then it is going to stop our Nginx service. And obviously, if we will try to refresh it, then nothing is really going to be displayed because we stopped the service. And we could now put this in restarted state. So it will try to be restarted, but since there is nothing to restart, so obviously it will just start the service. So all the options are really available. And of course, we can go ahead and run this one more time. And it will restart the service. And obviously I have to change the name here. And also the VS Code indicates on the fact that some application is running on port 80. So that is nice. If we change this to restart, this will be much more meaningful name. And that is how you can control different services on your destination servers. So now that our playbook starts to grow, then it's also worth talking about how you can define multiple variables in your playbooks. So say that now you have some actions that are quite similar and you'd like to be more organized and maintain some variables so that it will be much more clear to understand what this playbook is about. So right here in the host section, then you can also define a section that says vars. And right here you can start defining your key value pairs that will be accessible as variables. So we could go ahead and start with nginx, for example. We could say that our desired package is equal to nginx, and it is more common to use underscore to separate between your words in Ansible, so just take that in consideration. And right here I can go ahead and now refer to this variable. So I could decide that I'd like to have more meaningful task name here, and I could turn this to install, and then I could refer to this variable with the double curly brackets, and also pay attention that it is better to use double quotes when you refer your variables in between the double quotes. So now this is the task name. I could also do that, obviously, for referring to the nginx itself, like the following, and let's actually delete the white spaces here. Okay, so I could also do that with much more places like the path and the destination. Now you might be bothered by the fact that now the task is going to display install nginx with all being lowercase, because that is the value that we gave here. So Ansible also supports filters to manipulate your data. So for the task name, say that I'd like to have the first letter capitalized, so I can go ahead and say title. And title is a special one because it will take all the words given in the task and it will turn the first letter to being an uppercase. So in order to prove you that, then I'm also going to mismatch our install here. Now you might be curious how I know all the available filters. So actually there is a nice documentation about Ansible playbook filters. And of course you can see that I have some more tabs opened and I'm going to cover these just in a bit. But all the links are obviously going to be available in the description. So you can see that, for example, for the example here, you might be sometimes in a situation that you refer to a variable that really does not exist. This usually happens when your playbook gets much bigger and there are multiple files that are defining the actions that you take. So in that case, you can always come up with a default in case that a variable does not exist, and we do this with the pipe syntax as you see here. Okay, so now if we go here and we try to delete everything and we basically run our playbook, then you can see the results. So you can see the install, and yeah, I made a mistake there because the filter was specific to the variable. So excuse me about saying that it will change to capital I. I will fix this immediately. And you can see that we also installed nginx successfully because nothing has been really changed. We already had nginx working on our system. So going back to our VS Code, then obviously I will change this to install like that. What is nice with variables is that you can define multiple types as well. Not only you can define strings and integers and booleans, you can also go ahead and define a list. And that means that I could change this to desired packages. And then if I was to go ahead and refer to some elements like with the hyphen syntax, then these will be packages that maybe I'd like to install. So say that I'd like to have SSHD and some more important packages like curl, etc. And now the challenge is to go to the task and then not repeating ourselves with the desired packages. because now we are having responsibility to install multiple packages. So how we are going to do that in Ansible? Well, in each task, there is a magic keyword that is named with items. With items is basically a keyword that allows iterating over a given list of elements. So we are going to go here to our first task and we will start taking some actions here. So we will first say that this is going to be install necessary packages. Okay, so we need actually a generic name to install all the desired packages. And then we are going to go here and write in the configurations of the task, so-called, not inside the module. I am going to go ahead and say with items, and then I will refer to the list of items that I have, basically the list of elements that we created. And if you remember, it was named desired packages, like that. Now, leaving it as it is not really going to work, because Ansible needs to understand the iterated value, and the way that Ansible works with it is by referring to the variable that is named item. Item is considered again as a built-in magic variable in tasks that is saved exactly for cases where a task is using with items. And so now this is going to be changed to being a single value, and then I will go ahead and will refer to the variable of item like this. And this might be a bit confusing, but that is actually how Ansible knows to iterate over values. And actually that is one of the ways of accomplishing this task. I could obviously refer to the list directly because it's already a list of elements, and the apt module supports also handling lists. But we also want to be familiar with the syntax of iterating over lists when we want to accomplish complex tasks like the following. So now if we bring our terminal and we clean everything and we run our playbook, let's zoom out a bit, and you can see that it starts working. Although I made a mistake trying to install a package that does not exist, it should be probably an SSH here. SSHD is the name of the service itself. If now we rerun our playbook, then it is going to run successfully, and that is exactly how we want to manage playbooks sometimes when we like to do complex setups. For example, if you'd like to shut down 8 services one after another, then using the with items approach is a wonderful idea. So to summarize the Ansible Playbooks tutorial perfectly, then I'd like to give some future advices for people that really would like to develop complex playbooks. So these will be the next topics that I would recommend learning. And also in the comment section, let me know if you want to see a tutorial on one of these. So first of all, we start here with the documentation of Jinja 2 examples, and this is how we templated different files. And you can see that there is a similar example to what we have accomplished in our tutorial that goes ahead and templates a test.j2 file, and it templates tmp/hostname. That has to be a file that already exists obviously in the host, and maybe it looks like this. You can see that it refers to the Ansible facts hostname. We refer to Ansible_hostname, which is also possible. And as you can see, there are multiple ways to accomplish things in Ansible. So this is a great documentation for reading on the template module deeply. Here we take a look to some filters that you can go ahead and use. We already saw some of these. You can see that, for example, you have even more complex filters like hitting on a random number. You can see that it says to get a random number from 1 to 100, but in steps of 10, then you can go ahead and use a filter like the following. And there are some more examples. Obviously, you can go ahead and shuffle lists. Maybe you'd like to do some things in random order. And if we scroll up a bit, you can see how many available options you have to filter your data and manipulate it. And these are really complex, and these are also taken from Python, okay? So if you're familiar with the Python programming language, then some of the filters are really going to sound familiar. For example, I scrolled here to the section that says transforming lists into dictionaries. You can see that even a filter like that is available. So that is very nice. And here is a further documentation on how to use more complex variables. You can see that some of these are already covered by in our tutorial. And there are also the option to do conditionals. You can decide that if some condition is matched to your scenario, then you can decide to take an action to run another task that depends on that. You can see that this is doable with the when keyword, and that is also very useful. And also there are Ansible roles, which is a bit more advanced and in a bit in a more larger scale. You can define a role that could include a list of playbooks that you would like to execute. You can take your tasks and assign them different tags, and then basically your roles should be in a very specific structure according to Ansible conventions. So you can see how many files are there. Okay, so this is the documentations that I will look up for in order to feel even more comfortable with Ansible and to really do cool things to manage hundreds or even thousands of servers. Okay, so this will wrap up our tutorial. Let me know if you'd like to see more Ansible tutorials on my channel or in any other DevOps tool. Please hit the like button in this video and consider subscribing to my channel for more DevOps tutorials, and I will see you in my next upload.